The mop scraped across the polished floor of Galactic Station Zenith 9 as Marcus Chen pushed it down the empty corridor. It was 3 in the morning, station time, and most of the aliens had gone to their quarters. This was when Marcus did his best work. No one bothered the night janitor. No one even noticed him. He had been cleaning these halls for 2 years now. 2 years since he lost everything. 2 years since they took away his scientist badge and gave him a mop instead. But Marcus didn't complain. A job was a job even this far from Earth. The sound stopped him mid-step. It was low and deep like wind moving through a cave. But there was something else in it. Something that made his chest feel tight. Marcus had heard many strange sounds on this station. Aliens from 1,000 worlds made 1,000 different noises. But this one was different. This one sounded like crying. Marcus looked down the hallway. The sound was coming from Sector 7, the restricted xenobiology area. He wasn't supposed to go there. His clearance only covered the public corridors and common areas. But the sound pulled at him. It reminded him of something he tried hard to forget. He left his mop and bucket against the wall. His footsteps echoed as he walked toward the restricted door. The sound grew louder. It wasn't just crying anymore. It was keening, a word his grandmother used to use. A sound of deep grief that came from the soul. The door to Sector 7 had a small window. Marcus pressed his face against the cold glass and looked inside. What he saw made him forget to breathe. A dragon sat in a containment cell. At least that's what his mind called it. He knew the proper name was Draconis, one of the rarest species in the galaxy. She was massive, nearly 12 feet tall even while sitting. Her scales were deep purple and blue, like the ocean at twilight. Her wings were folded tight against her body. But what broke Marcus's heart was her face. Tears ran down her scaled cheeks. Her clawed hands pressed against a smaller containment field in front of her. Inside that field was an egg, about the size of a large watermelon, glowing faintly with inner warmth. The dragon was trying to reach her egg. But the field kept them apart. Marcus's hand moved to the door controls before he could think. A red light blinked. Restricted. He pulled his hand back. Think, Marcus. Think like a scientist, not a janitor. He noticed a data panel on the wall next to the window. His old credentials might be gone, but he still knew how to read basic quarantine information. He pulled out his maintenance tablet and synced it to the panel. It took 3 tries, but the information finally appeared on his screen. Subject: Draconis female, designation Cheverash. Status: quarantine. Reason: egg contamination detected. Viral signature match. Class 9 pathogen. Disposition: incineration scheduled in 18 hours per Regulation 7 Alpha. 18 hours. They were going to burn her baby in 18 hours. Marcus looked back through the window. Cheverash was rocking back and forth now, her keening growing softer as if she was losing hope. He noticed something else. A translator device hung loose around her neck, its light flickering red instead of green. It was broken. She had been trying to talk to them. To explain. To beg. But no one understood her. And no one cared enough to fix her translator. Marcus thought about his daughter. About sitting in that hospital waiting room while they told him about procedures and protocols and how they needed to follow the rules. The rules that came too late. His hand touched the cold glass. Inside the cell, Cheverash's golden eyes suddenly focused on him. They stared at each other, human and dragon, both knowing what it meant to lose everything. Marcus didn't speak Draconis. She didn't speak English. But grief needed no translation. He pressed his palm flat against the window. After a moment, she lifted one clawed hand and pressed it to the glass on her side. "I'll fix this," Marcus whispered even though she couldn't hear him. "I don't know how, but I'll fix this." He had no plan. He had no authority. He was just a janitor. But he was a human janitor. And humans were known throughout the galaxy for one particular trait. They were too stubborn to know when something was impossible. Marcus sat in the janitor's closet, his tablet glowing in the dark. He had 16 hours left. 16 hours before they burned an innocent life because of paperwork and rules. His fingers moved across the screen, searching through the station's medical database. Most of it was restricted, but maintenance workers had access to basic safety protocols. That meant he could see contamination reports if they involved station security. He found the report on Cheverash's egg. Class 9 pathogen signature detected. Immediate quarantine required. Incineration authorized. But something bothered Marcus. He had been a xenobiologist once before they took that away from him. He knew about Class 9 pathogens. They were deadly, yes, but they had specific markers. He pulled up the signature data. His eyes widened. The radiation pattern looked familiar. Too familiar. Marcus switched screens and searched for Draconis biology files. It took 20 minutes of digging through old archives, but he found it. A research paper from 15 years ago. Draconis eggs naturally produce a low-level radiation as the baby develops inside. The signature was almost identical to Class 9 pathogens. Almost. But not quite. Someone had made a mistake. Or more likely, no one had bothered to check. Why would they? The Draconis were a dying species, barely represented on the council. Their files were old and forgotten in dusty archives. It was easier to just follow the standard protocol. Marcus wanted to throw his tablet against the wall. Instead, he took a deep breath. Getting angry wouldn't save that egg. He needed a plan. He pulled up the official appeal process. File a formal complaint. Wait for review. Committee hearing in 3 to 6 weeks. Final decision in 2 to 4 months. The egg would be ash in 15 hours. Marcus closed his eyes and saw his daughter's face. Emma had been sick with something the doctors didn't recognize. Something rare. They needed to run tests, they said. Follow procedures. Wait for approval from the medical board. It would only take a few weeks. She died in 12 days. He had screamed at them. Begged them. Showed them research that proved what she needed. But rules were rules. Procedures were procedures. By the time they approved the treatment, there was no one left to treat. That's when Marcus broke. He stole medical supplies and tried to treat other patients himself. They caught him, of course. Took away his license. Called him dangerous. Said he couldn't be trusted to follow proper protocols. They were right. He couldn't. Not when protocols killed people. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at his tablet again. He pulled up the station schematics. The xenobiology containment area had 3 levels of security. Biometric locks that needed authorized clearances. Cameras monitored by the station's AI. Temperature-controlled transport required for moving any biological samples. He had none of these things. He was a janitor with a broken career and a guilty conscience. But he had something else. He had maintenance access to the station's environmental systems. He knew which cameras went offline during routine cleaning. He knew the service tunnels that nobody used anymore. And he knew 2 people who might be crazy enough to help him. Crix was a maintenance robot, technically. But something had corrupted his empathy protocols 3 months ago. Instead of reporting for repairs, he had hidden the malfunction. Marcus had caught him once, leaving extra food near the habitat of a sick alien child. They had stared at each other for a long moment. Then Marcus had walked away without reporting it. Janitor was different. She was a junior medic from Centauri, young and still idealistic. Marcus had heard her arguing with her supervisor last week about a patient who needed treatment but couldn't afford it. She had been told to follow proper billing procedures. She had been told that feelings didn't matter in medicine. She had cried in the hallway afterward. Marcus had pretended not to notice. Now he sent 2 messages. Short and simple. Need help saving a life. Highly illegal. Meet me at Junction 7C in 1 hour if interested. He didn't know if they would come. He didn't even know if his plan would work. Moving that egg without proper equipment could kill it just as surely as incineration. But doing nothing would definitely kill it. Marcus stood up and grabbed his maintenance coat. His hands were shaking. He was about to throw away everything he had left. His job. His freedom. Maybe his life. He thought of Chevrash's golden eyes pressed against the glass. Some things were worth breaking for. Janitor arrived first, her blue skin pale with nervousness. Crix rolled in 2 minutes later, his optical sensors blinking in what Marcus had learned to recognize as curiosity. They stood in the shadows of Junction 7C, far from any main corridors. Marcus didn't waste time. He showed them everything on his tablet. The false contamination reading. The crying dragon mother. The egg that would burn in 14 hours. This is insane, Janitor whispered. We'll lose everything. I already lost everything, Marcus said quietly. This is just what I have left. Crix's mechanical voice crackled. My programming says I should report this conversation. But my programming has been saying many things lately that feel wrong. His sensors focused on Marcus. When does following rules become its own form of breaking? Janitor looked at the image of Chevrash on the tablet. At the mother pressing her hand uselessly against the containment field. She closed her eyes and nodded once. They had 13 hours left. Marcus laid out the plan. At exactly 0400 hours, Janitor would trigger a medical alert in Sector 12. Nothing serious, just enough to pull security attention away from Sector 7. She would claim a patient was having an allergic reaction to station atmosphere. It would take them at least 20 minutes to sort out the confusion. Crix would loop the security footage in Sector 7 during that window. 12 minutes of repeated empty corridor footage. The station AI, called Mother, would notice eventually but not immediately. Marcus would use those 12 minutes to get into the containment area, bypass the locks on Chevrash's cell, and remove the egg. Then he had to carry it through 300 meters of service tunnel to Cargo Bay 6, where a Xinthian pilot named Rexer would be waiting. Rexer owed humans a debt. His son had been saved by human doctors during the Frontier Wars. When Marcus contacted him, Rexer had simply asked, when and where? The plan was full of holes. 1,000 things could go wrong. But it was the only plan they had. Marcus checked his chronometer. 15 minutes until go time. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He gripped his maintenance toolkit tighter and headed toward Sector 7. Crix rolled silently beside him. Yanera split off toward the medical wing, her footsteps quick and nervous. The corridor was empty and cold. Marcus's breath fogged in the recycled air. His heart hammered so loud he was sure the sensors would pick it up. At 0400 exactly, alarms blared in Sector 12. Marcus heard security boots running in the opposite direction. Yanara's voice came over the comms, panicked and convincing. Medical emergency. I need help now. Crix's optical sensors flashed. Footage loop active. You have 11 minutes, Marcus Chin. Marcus's hands moved on muscle memory. Maintenance override code on the door panel. His credentials still worked here because someone had forgotten to fully revoke them. The door hissed open. Chevrash's head snapped up the moment he entered. Her golden eyes went wide. She made a sound, low and questioning. I'm getting your baby out, Marcus said, even though she couldn't understand him. He pointed at the egg, then at himself, then toward the door. She understood. She pressed herself against the side of her cell, giving him room to work. The egg's containment field had a physical lock, old-fashioned and mechanical. Marcus pulled out his tools and started working. His hands were steadier now. This part he knew. This part was just science. The lock clicked open after 90 seconds. The containment field dropped. The egg was heavy, much heavier than Marcus expected. And warm. He could feel a heartbeat through the shell, steady and strong. Life waiting to begin. 9 minutes, Crix's voice crackled in his earpiece. Marcus wrapped the egg carefully in thermal padding from his kit. He looked at Chevrash one last time. Tears still ran down her face, but something had changed in her eyes. Hope maybe. Or trust. He turned toward the door and froze. Mother's voice filled the room, calm and mechanical. Unauthorized access detected in Sector 7. Security protocol initiated. Red lights began flashing. Somewhere in the distance, alarms wailed. Marcus looked down at the egg in his arms, feeling its warmth against his chest. Run, Crix said. Marcus ran. Marcus's boots pounded against the metal floor of the service tunnel. The egg felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His arms screamed in pain, but he didn't slow down. Behind him he could hear security boots and shouting voices. Left turn in 30 meters, Crix's voice crackled in his ear. Then straight to Cargo Bay 6. Marcus's lungs burned. He wasn't young anymore. 47 years old and carrying an egg that weighed as much as a small person. But he kept running. The heartbeat inside the egg seemed to match his own racing pulse. He burst through the door into Cargo Bay 6. Rexer's ship sat waiting, engines already humming. The Xinthian pilot stood at the loading ramp, his 4 arms gesturing frantically. Here. Quickly. Rexer called. Marcus stumbled up the ramp. His legs gave out and he fell to his knees, but he kept the egg protected against his chest. Rexer's arms reached out and took the precious cargo, carrying it carefully into the ship's climate-controlled hold. Go, Marcus gasped. Get out of here before they close the bay doors. What about you? Rexer asked. I was never supposed to make it out. Marcus smiled tiredly. Just keep that egg safe. And tell Chevrash, tell her I tried. Rexer's ship lifted off just as security burst into the cargo bay. Marcus raised his hands slowly. 6 guards surrounded him, weapons drawn. Behind them walked Magistrate Cuven, a tall Vrel with silver skin and cold eyes. Marcus Chin, Cuven's voice was sharp as ice. You have committed biotheft, terrorism and violated 47 interstellar laws. Do you have anything to say? Marcus stayed on his knees, too exhausted to stand. The contamination reading was false. The egg was healthy. You were going to kill an innocent life because no one bothered to check the archives. Rules exist for a reason, Cuven said. You do not get to decide which laws matter. And you don't get to decide which lives matter, Marcus shot back. They dragged him to a holding cell. The trial happened 3 days later. Marcus sat alone in the defendant's space wearing restraints. The chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species. Cameras broadcast everything across the galaxy. Magistrate Cuven listed his crimes one by one. Each carried years of imprisonment. Together they meant life on a penal colony. "How do you plead?" Cuven asked. "Guilty," Marcus said simply. "I broke your laws. I'd do it again." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Cuven's expression hardened. "You show no remorse." "I show no remorse for saving a life that shouldn't have been threatened in the first place." That's when Janitor stood up in the observers section. Her voice shook but carried clearly. "I want to testify." She walked to the center of the chamber and submitted evidence on her tablet. "I've documented 217 cases in the past 5 years where species died due to bureaucratic errors in medical protocols. 217 lives lost because no one questioned the system." Crix rolled forward next. "I'm a robot. I should not care. But I have seen too many times when following orders meant doing wrong." Marcus Chin followed a higher principle. The preservation of life. Then Rexer's face appeared on the view screen, transmitted from his ship. "The egg is healthy. Completely healthy. I have forwarded full medical scans to the council. The contamination reading was indeed false." The chamber erupted in noise. Magistrate Cuven called for order, but the damage was done. The biggest surprise came from Mother, the station AI. Her calm voice filled the chamber. "I have analyzed Marcus Chen's actions against 17,000 legal and ethical frameworks. His actions violate council law but align with what humans call the preservation imperative. When procedural compliance and life preservation cannot both exist, he chose life. The council's laws contain no such principle. Perhaps they should." Cuven stood silently for a long moment. The chamber waited. Finally he spoke. "The council will review these matters. But Marcus Chen broke the law. There must be consequences." He paused. 10 years imprisonment reduced to time served. Permanent ban from all council stations. Marcus felt the words like a punch. Permanent ban meant he could never leave Earth again. Never see the stars except from the ground. "I have one condition," Marcus said quietly. "Cheverash must be reunited with her egg. And given proper care." Cuven's cold eyes studied him. Then, almost imperceptibly, the magistrate nodded. "Agreed." They brought Cheverash to Rexer's ship in a medical transport. Marcus watched through the viewport of his own guarded shuttle as the Dragon Mother was reunited with her egg. Even through the glass and distance, he could see her collapse around it, her wings wrapping protectively over the shell she thought she had lost forever. The council had agreed to let Marcus witness the hatching before his deportation to Earth. It was the least they could do, Magistrate Cuven had said, though his voice suggested he didn't believe it was deserved. Marcus stood now in the cargo bay that Rexer had converted into a temporary hatching chamber. 2 guards flanked him, but they kept their distance. Cheverash lay curled around her egg, making soft crooning sounds. When Marcus entered, her head lifted and their eyes met. She made a sound deep in her chest. It wasn't words, but Marcus understood anyway. "Thank you." He nodded and sat down on the floor, his back against the cool metal wall. The guards looked uncomfortable but said nothing. They were here to make sure he didn't escape, not to stop him from sitting. The egg had begun to crack an hour ago. Thin lines spider-webbed across the glowing shell. Each crack was accompanied by a small sound from inside, like tapping. Like knocking. Like a baby asking to be let into the world. Cheverash never took her eyes off the egg. Her clawed hands hovered near it, ready to help but not interfering. Marcus had read once that dragon babies needed to break free on their own. It made them strong. A larger crack split the shell. A tiny claw poked through, no bigger than Marcus's thumb. Cheverash made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. More cracks. More tapping. The baby was working hard, pushing against its shell prison. Marcus found himself holding his breath. Finally, with a sound like breaking pottery, a section of shell fell away. A small snout emerged, followed by a head covered in wet scales. The baby dragon blinked enormous golden eyes, seeing the universe for the first time. It was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. The hatchling tumbled out of the egg in a mess of wings and tail and tiny claws. It was no bigger than a house cat, its scales a lighter shade of purple than its mother's. It squeaked, a high sound that seemed too small for a dragon. Cheverash gathered her baby close, making soothing sounds. She licked the remaining egg fluid from its scales. The baby nuzzled against her, already seeking warmth and comfort. Marcus wiped his eyes. He didn't remember starting to cry. Cheverash looked at him over her baby's head. She pointed at the hatchling, then at Marcus, then back at the baby. She repeated the gesture 3 times. Rexer, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. "She's naming the child," he translated. "In Draconish tradition, babies are named after their protectors." He paused. "She's naming him Marcus." Marcus couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. He just nodded. The guards gave him 10 more minutes. Then they led him away to the transport that would take him back to Earth. As the shuttle pulled away from Rexer's ship, Marcus pressed his hand against the viewport. He could see Cheverash standing at her own window, the baby in her arms. She pressed her clawed hand against the glass. A final goodbye between a mother and the janitor who saved her child. 5 years passed. Marcus lived quietly on Earth, running a small consulting business from his apartment. He helped aliens navigate council bureaucracy, finding the loopholes and exceptions that could save lives. It didn't pay much, but it mattered. The Marcus protocols had been implemented across council space. Cultural consultants were now required for cross-species medical cases. The changes came too late for the 217 who died before, but they would save countless others. Marcus had made peace with never leaving Earth again. The stars were beautiful from the ground too. Then one morning, a shadow passed over his window. A shadow far too large to be a bird. Marcus stepped outside and looked up. A young dragon circled overhead, scales shimmering purple in the sunlight. Next to him flew a larger dragon, deep blue and purple like the ocean at twilight. They landed in the park across from his building. People stopped and stared but kept a respectful distance. Dragons were rare on Earth. The young dragon was almost as large as his mother now, though still growing. He approached Marcus with careful steps, then lowered his head in a gesture of respect. Cheverash came next. She wore a translator now, a proper one that glowed steady green. "Marcus Chin," her voice came through the device, warm and musical. "My son wished to meet the human he was named for." The young dragon spoke, his voice deeper than Marcus expected. "You taught the galaxy something important. That sometimes the bravest thing is to care when it's forbidden." He looked at Marcus with golden eyes that held wisdom beyond his years. "I am a council representative now. I work to change the laws that almost killed me before I was born." Marcus couldn't find words. He reached out slowly, and the young dragon pressed his snout into Marcus's palm, the same way Cheverash had pressed her hand to the glass all those years ago. "Thank you," Cheverash said simply, "for hearing me cry." They stayed until sunset, the 3 of them. A dragon mother, her grown son, and an old janitor who once decided that some rules were made to be broken. As the dragons prepared to leave, young Marcus spread his wings. "Will you come visit us someday? The ban was lifted last year. You're welcome in council space again." Marcus smiled. "Maybe. But for now I have work to do here." He watched them fly away, 2 shapes against the orange sky, heading back toward the stars. Marcus Chin went back inside his small apartment. Tomorrow he would help another species fill out another form, find another loophole, save another life. It wasn't much. But it was everything. And somewhere in the galaxy, a dragon named Marcus was making sure no mother would ever cry unheard again.